Thanks very much, Colette. My name is Maria Young and I work with Green Spaces for Health, and it's a project of Cork Healthy Cities. And the other employers are SHEP, the Social Health and Education Project, and Cork City Council. So it's a number of groups who came together to fund this position. And we work in two main areas, food and community food production. And the second big area then is biodiversity. We work a lot to try to maintain habitat or create habitat where none exists, or to try to protect habitat where it's in danger. And we've all sorts of projects going on with regard to that. We started out in one parish in Cork, and that was the South Parish, which extends from the City Hall right up to UCC, and from the south channel of the River Lee up to Evergreen Street. And we were there for about a year and a bit. Very few green spaces in that area. In fact, all the green spaces are ecclesiastical. They're all graveyards. And thank goodness that we have graveyards, because a place like that wouldn't have any green space at all. And that's where we sort of cut our teeth, because the local community Gardaí approached us one day about a site that was a decommissioned graveyard, a very ancient graveyard called St. John's. Don't know if you're familiar with it at all. It's off Quaker Road. It's beautiful. It's like being in the countryside, and a lot of people don't know that it's there. You have to kind of find it. And there was a lot of antisocial behaviour there. You could enter it from Quaker Road, let's say, and then in this little estate that was built in the 1911 called Park Owen St. John's, because in the 12th century there was a church called St. John's there. And you could go right down to the end of it, and you could go through another gate onto Douglas Street. And speaking to all the older people there, they remember that it was their playground. But fast forward to now, and it was a place that was very problematic for the local population. So they closed the gate and barricaded it. So there's only entrance now from the top, which is a pity. But so we approached the City Council and we asked, could we become the guardians, as it were, of that space? And they agreed. One of the first things we did was ask them not to spray glyphosate. At the time, like Cork City Council were spraying in all the public parks. They've stopped that now about 2 years ago, because we had just installed a beehive on the rooftop of St. John's College, which is just a stone's throw from this green area. So one of the first things we did was we planted a hedgerow. We weren't allowed to do much in the middle area for archaeological reasons, but we planted about 11 or 12 trees there, and it's going well since then. It's like, that was 2019, it's now 2024, and we have a lovely little group that go there every week. And during the pandemic, that was about the only place where people living around that area could go, because Nanonagle was closed. The cathedral was closed, so there was just nowhere else. So it was great to go in the middle of the pandemic and see people being able to walk around and sit down, and some people went down there to work every day, you know. So about a year or two later then, we were given kind of permission to go beyond South Parish. And I was dying to grow food all along, and I couldn't really grow it in there, so there are now 24 community gardens across Cork City. We actually founded 7 of them after the pandemic. Post-COVID, the amount of interest in green spaces was just shot up. And suddenly, because we had this relationship with the council, and because it worked well, like the antisocial behaviour just dropped. We went back there week after week after week, and I suppose because we had a presence there and we began to hold events there, you know, all that was happening ceased. There's still the odd thing there because of where it is, but it's much improved. So we had, because of that, then a good relationship with Cork City Council. And post-COVID, when we were asked, for example, with Toker to start a community garden, all I had to do really is contact the Parks Department, and they gave us land in Clashdove Park, which was great. Had I gone before COVID, I don't know that would have happened. Everything changed. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that, I think, this morning with regard to the gardens. So we're delighted, of course, to be working with MTU, and we've done a number of initiatives now together. And they've been very productive, and we hope to continue with those as well going forward. There are so many things that we can do together and that you can do here as well. And you're blessed with the amount of space you have. It's so green here. It's fantastic. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So I'll just run through some of the things we're doing. This is a map of Toker Community Garden, and it was designed by a graduate of Kinsale Permaculture College. And all we do really is very much based on permacultural principles, which is do no harm. So we didn't do much displacement of even land when we went in there. We tried to work with what we had. And that's the plan that was given to us first day. The same plan then was used out in Bishopstown, in Murphy's Farm. I don't know if you're familiar with that garden. It's only around the corner from here, actually. And in actual fact, we've worked not just with the library department here, but we've also worked with the Home Economics and Business. And we've also worked with, who else now? There's a few more anyway, and I think they came over to the other community garden in Bishopstown, and they grew some plants and herbs and stuff like that. So this is Toker Community Garden, and this is the one that we directly run. We helped set up about 7 of them, and we started the network for the 24 gardens. And they're all autonomous, they all do their own thing, but this is the one that we run. And Toker Community Garden is now 3 years old. This November it'll be 3 years old. And it's right there in Clashdove Park for anyone who doesn't know. And when we were setting it up first day, we were told we were making a big mistake because it would be burnt or, it would be destroyed. There's nothing kind of protecting it. There's no big fence or wall or anything. In fact, that was one of the first things people said to us, why don't you put up a fence and a gate and have some kind of a system? And we said, no, a community garden is for everyone. It has to be accessible. Even if it means you're vulnerable, it has to be open for everyone. And so many people just drop in, and it's great. They wander around and they have a look at the pond and they have a look at the beds and everything. So what we did do is we planted a hedgerow consisting of about 300 trees all around the periphery of it. It's about this high now, I guess. And we planted native trees. And actually, the guy who helped design that, a lovely man called Tony Langlow, suddenly died last week. He was only 61. And he was going to come back out now in the in the winter, and he was going to work further on that hedgerow with us. Very sad, lovely man. So we'll probably plant a tree for Tony now during the week. But you can see, it looks as if it's been there forever, but no, it hasn't. And prior to that, it was just cut grass. In that park, they cut the grass pretty religiously every 2 weeks. So half of the garden for us is dedicated to food growing, and the other half is for biodiversity, and I'll talk about that in a second. So this is just give an idea of the beds. Like with the 18 raised beds, we get 3 different crops into them in 1 year. So we practice crop rotation, and each bed is about 4 meters long. It's about, 18 inches tall. We've raised some of them recently for people who come in with wheelchairs so that they can access. We couldn't grow directly into the ground because this was formerly a bog, and then a lot of rubble was put into the land when they were building the housing estates nearby. So we got the raised beds made by the Men's Shed. And then we brought in soil, and the soil we brought in wasn't very good, actually. We were advised to get soil from a building company, a topsoil from the countryside where they were building, and it wasn't great. But we've turned that around, and we've used it as an example that you can amend soil. It's not the end of the world if the soil you're working with isn't good. Over years, you can amend it, and we've done an awful lot of amending by adding things like G-Up, which is produced in Blarney. It's like horse manure. We've added lime. We've added seaweed. So there's a learning in all of that. The other thing about the garden is we don't have a horticulturalist. We started with a core group of about 4 or 5 people from Toker. Nobody had ever grown food. I had grown food at home for about 2 or 3 years beforehand, so I had some idea. And again, I think there was an advantage in that, because how we did it was we asked each person to adopt a vegetable family. And the onus was on them to go and do the research and, learn about what to do. And it worked to a certain extent. There was one lady, if you remember Frances, she was exceptional about carrots and the carrot family, and she really went into an awful lot of detail, but other people then didn't do a tap. But anyway, the idea was to learn and share. And, 3 years later, I think we're pretty good now. We've learned a lot, learned by doing, experiential learning. And then, of course, people in the community just start arriving and giving advice. So we have a lovely man called Oliver. And Oliver now must be well into his 70s. And he comes to us every Saturday morning and Wednesday. And he gives us advice on the tomatoes. He comes from a family who had a big tomato growing industry in Northern Ireland. It collapsed in the 1950s with the advent of supermarkets. But there's nothing he doesn't know about tomatoes. So that's his area. And he's been so generous with his, information and knowledge. It's great. And he really is kind of wanting us to write down the information, and so that if he's not around, we'll be able to continue it on. So, if you wait and if you're patient within your environment, there'll always be people who have expertise. And that's what we try to encourage. We're empowering the community. Instead of kind of subcontracting the knowledge and bring it in, So that's worked very well. We've had a great crop this year of all sorts of things. We had 4 beds with early potatoes, with cabbages. We also do some with carrots, with strawberries, as you can see there. You name it, we've planted it. It's pretty much planted every vegetable that we'd be very familiar with in Ireland. But what we're also doing is planting some crops that we mightn't be so familiar with. One of the volunteers in the garden is from Mexico, and it just turns out that she's a plant scientist, and she tried for ages to try and get UCC and other places to experiment with amaranth, which is a crop that's native to Mexico. And nobody took her up, but we did. And she grew the amaranth in our polytunnel, and she grew it in a bed outdoors to see would it work. And it did. It was spectacularly successful, actually. And what she did then was she took the seed from the amaranth and she grew it again the next year. So what she's doing is she's naturalizing the seed. She's big into climate change and how we will have to consider growing crops that we mightn't have had traditionally, I mean, you saw what happened with the potato crop this year. And we ourselves actually in the community garden in Mahon, we had grown 2 big long rows of potatoes straight onto the ground, and they were destroyed with the rainfall. So not that we'll ever replace the potato. We'll have to just think of other ways of doing things, I think. We're not so vulnerable when it comes to that here because we've raised beds. But if you're looking at a market garden, which we're hoping to work on, we're hoping to get a market garden into Toker somewhere. We'll have to kind of be very careful how we go about our business with the amount of rainfall now that's falling. We have an outdoor classroom in Toker, and we've had all sorts of events and talks. So Mabel, for example, did a cooking demonstration with the amaranth and told us all about the cultural significance of that grain in her culture in Mexico, going right back to the Aztecs and the Incas. Here we've Hazel Hurley. Hazel did a 4-week course on globalization for the community. And this isn't just for the people in the garden. We usually poster it all around, and we've strong social media presence, and anybody is welcome into these talks. We've a guy in the garden, a volunteer, his name is Alfonso. And Alfonso works, he's from Texas, and he's here in Cork for a couple of years, and he works with sharks. He's going out tagging sharks, and he's looking at how wind farms on the eastern coast are affecting the shark population. So he keeps us up to speed with all of that. And he's given a talk on sharks, which was very popular in the garden. And he's also now going out to schools that we're organising with for him to give a talk on. So, yeah. We, after every single gardening session, we always sit down to eat. And by the way, we've got about 70 people on our WhatsApp group. And of those, I'd say we get about 20 to 25 people on Saturdays, and maybe less than on Wednesdays, maybe 10 to 15, not even, maybe 10 or 12 on Wednesdays. And we've got 15 different nationalities. And it's about half and half. Half the people are from Cork and the other half are from all sorts of our parts of the world. And what we're doing is we cook at every gardening session, and we're trying to use our produce. And I was explaining there earlier, it's all vegetarian. We don't need to talk about meat or mention meat. We're trying to really emphasize that vegetarian food can be really tasty. And it's great having all these different cultures because we're getting recipes from them. Like, for example, in Ireland, we wouldn't be that familiar with beans and bean preparation. This year we grew 23 different varieties of beans from all over the world, and we're drying them now. And we've been cooking with beans all throughout the summer to kind of familiarize people with, how they taste and how you can prepare them. So there's no kind of lecturing people and kind of putting people under pressure to adopt one type of eating over another, but it's all about doing and tasting and experiencing, and then let people do what they will, Like when we started out, first day, we used to have a cup of tea at the end of every gardening session. And people began to bring cakes and biscuits and things. And then the local shop donated a big box of potatoes and sweets. And it was like a tuck shop, the children got to know that there was stuff for free. So we had to put a stop to that. And we had to send all that stuff back. And now we're trying to be a sugar-free zone, but we don't make a big deal about it either. We just supply this food, and sometimes we cook on site as well. We grew a Jerusalem artichoke there, and it's really thriving. And Luna, she just sliced it really thinly on Saturday, and she cooked it in front of us. She just fried it with sage, onion, garlic. It was delicious, and we had it on lovely sourdough bread. So that's the kind of thing we do. We actually did a survey with 2 students from MTU here. They went around to schools and they had a questionnaire for children, asking children what were their 5 favourite vegetables and why, and who went shopping. Did they go shopping with their parents? And then the children had to figure out the food miles of the food. It was very successful, and it actually influenced us and what we grow, and when we do work with children, what we do with them, We have a number of schools working with the garden. In fact, this morning, Educate Together, they come over every Wednesday. They didn't come this morning because of all the rain, but they've been fantastic. Every week without fail, they come over and they're like experts now. I mean, they actually started their own garden in the school, and I'd say there's not a child now within a radius of about 4 kilometres of the garden who doesn't know how to plant onions, potatoes, garlic, let's say. It's great. And that's been the trend. Any of the schools that came to us, they all started gardens. For example, Glasheen Boys National School have their own garden now. Toker Girls, Coláiste Éamon Rish, the secondary school, and Educate Together. So yeah, this is the type of food. This is an example of the type of food we produce in the garden. We had a fantastic tomato crop, thanks to Oliver this year. So a lot of our work was with tomatoes. Onto the cookery course, and we decided with our produce that we'd have a cookery course for children aged 8 to 12. And that happened 2 years ago. We have a cook one of our volunteers is a cook, Mandy. And that went down really well. It was a 4-week course, and it was great just to be able to teach children how to work with knives and flame. Their parents were delighted because they said they'd never do that at home. And the idea was that the children would go to home and cook for their family. And we just used the produce from the garden, and we had 2 outdoor stoves. Camping stoves, that's all we have. We don't have any facilities really in the garden, but that's absolutely fine. And we had a bicycle that when you cycle the bike, it powers a smoothie maker. And we were able to do things like a tomato sauce with that. And so everything we did, we were able to manage on site. We even made pizza Napoli style. One of the children, their mother was from Naples, and she came along one day, and she took one of the classes and she brought dough. And it's a type of dough that you don't have to put into the oven. You can put it on a pan, and that's how you create your pizza. So they were thrilled with that, and they all got the dough to go home with, and they were thought where to get that dough if they want to make it again. So anyway, out of that was so successful that we thought it'd be great if we could do it more. And then we came up with the idea of doing the book. And MTU were fantastic. Caroline was an amazing resource. Caroline proofread the book from cover to cover. She gave us loads of tips. We wouldn't have known the first thing about copyright only for MTU now, and things like that, because we'd never done anything like that before. And so really you could argue that this whole book was produced in-house with the help of MTU, and they also gave us some money, I think, towards the printing costs that we were very grateful for. And it's up on the MTU website as well, free of charge. So we're very grateful for that. And just to let you know, in case you're interested, we're working on a second book now on biodiversity. So I'll be knocking on your door again. But the book has been very popular. It went into its second print. It's gone all over the world because I work with Cork Healthy Cities. They're part of WHO. And the book went to all the meetings in Europe. And recently we were in Porto, and it went out there as well. It went out to Japan. Some copies of it have gone to America. So yeah, it's great. And the recipes are lovely, and it's just beautiful to look at. And again, that was done in-house. We have an artist, volunteer gardener, Luna. She's absolutely talented. We had no idea how gifted she was when we were writing the book. She just approached us and she said, "Do you want me to illustrate?" And we said, "Yeah, sure, you might as well." And then when we saw the quality of the work that she did, it's phenomenal. So we're looking out for her now, because she gave up her day job to concentrate now on being an artist, because she's so talented. So there's a couple of copies there for anyone, and it's available on the MTU website as well to download. So thank you for that. The biophilia here, I mean, what you did here with the plants is absolutely beautiful. So you brought me in, but to be honest, you knew as much as I did about the plants, but it was lovely to be part of it. Colette and Caroline in the library, and all the plants that you're installing here. That's wonderful. That's another lovely initiative that I think we could all do in different institutions. And it's really made the place look very pleasant. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the Swifts. We have a big project where we're installing bird boxes for all sorts of birds, actually, but we concentrated this year on the Swifts. We got a grant and we purchased a number of boxes with that grant. And the Swifts are in trouble. Depending on which report you read, they're down 40 to 57% in Ireland. It's really tragic. And it's for a number of reasons. One of them is climate change. And it's just very difficult now to make the journey with all the weather events that are happening from sub-Saharan Africa right up to Cork or to anywhere in Europe. There's the insect population has dropped by about 70%. All across Europe. So there's a shortage of food. I mean, in the UK, there's a big survey at the moment on bats, and bats also eat insects, and they're finding that a lot of bats are suffering from starvation. So everything is interconnected. We need more forage in the city. We need more forage everywhere. We need to stop using pesticides. It was hugely disappointing that in the EU this year, this proposed ban on pesticides wasn't passed. So we're now living with pesticides again for another 10 years, despite the fact that it's cataclysmic, really, what's happening. So there's that. And then the other reason, I suppose, would be buildings. Swifts don't live in trees. They don't nest in trees. They live in buildings. They've traditionally been in older buildings where there's niches in eaves. And a lot of those niches now are being covered up for, people insulating their houses and that, or else older buildings are being demolished. So their habitat now is disappearing as well. And like what should have happened really is that new buildings, it should have been mandated that in areas where there are swift populations, that new buildings should have swift bricks incorporated at the design stage and at the building stage. What we're trying to do now is go around and install bricks or install boxes, and it's always much more difficult. It's a lot of work, you know. So anyway, that's what we did here in MTU. We're so thrilled with this project. We're showing it everywhere because we put up, I don't know, 30 or 40 boxes this year alone. And these are the ones we know the birds have gone into. Sometimes it can take 2 or 3 years for the birds to actually have the courage to go into the boxes or to even know where they are, to locate them. But it was miraculous here for some reason. Straight away, the birds became aware of the boxes and they used them. And we know that they were in number 1, number 3, and number 5. Now, they could be in the others as well, but they're the ones that we witnessed. And I witnessed it, and so did Noel Linehan, who's really the guy who inspired all of this. Noel lives in Bishopstown and he's an expert on the swifts. He's an absolute inspiration since I've met him. I go on these walks with him maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and every time I do, something fabulous comes out of it, and he was the one who inspired us to go down this route. So just for any other kind of college or university looking in today, I'll say a word about the boxes. These are really good boxes. They were manufactured in the Netherlands, and they're made of a composite material. They're quite heavy. And I think it was Finton here who put them up on campus. That was brilliant. We normally have to get a certified builder to put them up because they're heavy. And they have a plate, and you attach the plate first to the wall, and then you hook the box on, and then you can see these screws, they're bolts actually, they're screwed into the wall, and they're stainless steel. So they've got a very, I think they've a lifetime guarantee actually. You don't have to keep going up year after year to clean them or anything. They're absolutely fine. But there are other Swift boxes out there, and I'd sort of say to people, be careful about using timber Swift boxes, because the thing about the Swift is that they will keep going back to the same house every year. And if the house becomes unlivable because it's rotting or it's disintegrated, it's extremely distressing for the Swift. You know, the chances are that it's just not good. So these, at least, like, they're very solid. And you can see the little hole there where the Swift enters. And you might see this as well up here. There's a little black object there with a cable. That's a speaker. And we install those with the boxes, and we play the call of the Swift through that speaker, because they may not be aware of the boxes. And it's a very particular call. It's the call of 2 Swifts sort of having a conversation. When we got the call boxes, there was a call with it, and it wasn't the right one. It was a Swift of its own, and so Noel changed it to the other one. So within about a month, I think, the Swifts lodged here, which is great. And what they do then is they have their chicks in here. And the thing about the Swift, for anyone who doesn't know, it's the most remarkable bird. It can travel at speeds of 69 miles per hour. You have to be careful where you put the boxes, because they're a bit like an airplane, how they approach the boxes. They need open space, and they literally fly in directly into the box. So if there was another building in the way or a tree or anything, it wouldn't work. You have to have an open area. And then you don't want the boxes facing south or west, really, because it gets too hot for the chicks inside. You really need north or maybe northeast. And so they have this tremendous journey from sub-Saharan Africa right up to, in this instance, Cork. And they have their chicks, and the chicks do an awful lot of work inside in the boxes, because Swifts don't walk around on the ground. They don't land on the ground. From the moment those chicks are ready, they fall out of the box and they're on the wing for 3 years. They never land anywhere. They sleep in the air. They mate in the air. How they sleep in the air is they shut down half of their brain and they close one of their eyes, and they're just on autopilot. They mate in the air, they eat in the air. If they need water, they just flow low over a river and they open their mouths and then they're back up. So they're absolutely remarkable. And it's because of their structure. They've got very, very short legs. They're not at all their legs aren't adapted for walking on the ground. So the little chicks actually do press ups and everything to strengthen their wings. And Noel has footage of that. If anyone doesn't believe, I can get that for you. It's amazing. They're up against the wall and they're pressing up against the wall back and forth over and over, just to strengthen their wings so that they're ready when they fall out. So yeah, hopefully now those same swifts that went in there last year will come back. We'll have to do a little bit more work on observing, the return of them and to see if the other boxes are used next year. So we can expect to see them all going well around May. And they leave then in August. And they don't leave any mess either, by the way. That's an advantage for people with new buildings who are worried about that. So I think they're a great bird, to have. It's so easy to do this. It's no worry at all. So I'd be encouraging anybody else listening in, to install boxes if there's a swift population in the area. Each box was about, I was looking at it there yesterday, it's about 55 sterling, even though we bought them in euro. I don't know why they gave us the price in sterling. And then there's the transportation over, and the call box is, I don't know, it was about 20 euro. And if anybody wants the addresses, I can just email me and I can put you in contact. So, so after that then, one of the things we'd love to do in Cork is have an avian tower. I don't know why we don't have one in Ireland. They're very popular in other parts of Europe, particularly the Netherlands. So we again worked with MTU on this, and we approached the School of Architecture, which I think is run by MTU and UCC. And the third years took up this, and we went walking all around Tramore Valley Park. And then we had Noel going in, talking to them, and then I went in and gave a talk, and then it was the third year's developed 20 models, and they're stunning to look at. And they had an exhibition in the school there in Annonagle on Douglas Street. And then we took it down to City Hall, and we invited the architects from City Hall down to look at the exhibition, and we invited the Parks Department, the Environmental Department, the Climate Change Department, and we had a big meeting there about what can the city do for the swift population. And we were sort of advocating that for all the new buildings, particularly what's going on in the Docklands, that they incorporate these swift bricks at the construction stage. For example, wagtails are also on the amber list, wagtails and swifts. They're nearly all on the amber list, heading towards the red list. I mean, imagine a day that'll come when they don't arrive from Africa. It would just be very, very sad. So the wagtails tend to live under bridges, and it's so difficult to install wagtail boxes under bridges that are installed. The time to do it is when they're being constructed, So if only the city could make it mandatory that this is considered at design stage. That's what we were trying to propose, and we gave them some swift bricks, and they took them away with them just as an example. So that's some of the models there you can see. They're very futuristic, and when it came down to it, this was for bats actually, this particular one. And they all have little holes for different types of birds. The thing about the avian towers is that on the top floor, they can cater for swifts. A floor down, they could cater for house martins. A floor down from that, they can cater for bats. So the one tower can cater for several species. And they all have different apertures. The aperture for the swift is very particular. If it's a couple of millimeters over or a couple of millimeters under, it won't work. If it's a couple of millimeters over, for example, predators could get into the box. If it's too small, they might get in and they mightn't be able to maneuver to get back out. So it's all very particular sizes. You can actually put bee panels on these towers as well, and you can have maternity units for bats. So it would be great to have one, we think, in Tramore Valley Park. It was like a beacon, and you could have a hide and people could look at the comings and goings of the different species. So None of these would actually work in real life. They were too futuristic in a way for the Swifts. Because the Swift knows what a house looks like now. They know what a building looks like. They mightn't recognise any of these, you know. But nonetheless, it was a great exercise. And what's after happening as a consequence is we were invited to a talk yesterday, or a meeting of all the different architectural colleges in Ireland who were changing the curricula now to accommodate design for biodiversity, to incorporate biodiversity into building designs. So it was great that they thought to contact us, and this came up in conversation, and we're going to go through another iteration of it and keep refining it. I think if we can get money from the City Council or whoever, that we could get architectural students from MTU to work with the Architect's Office in Cork to design this tower that would be the first of its kind in Ireland. There's a lot of interest in it, and
actually for STEM, women in STEM, this year Kevin Busby from the architecture department very kindly gives a few of these pieces, and we had them on display on the foyer, and I think people liked them, they liked looking at them, they're a work of art.
They were beautiful, yeah. And I mean, some of them would work all right for certain species. I think that was another bat one, that would work fine. But, and like all of them had components that would work. It's just, there needs to be further work in it. And it was all done in one term. So we probably need to dedicate a little bit more time to it. But that was a great event. These were the 5 winners in the end. This one was considered by Noel to be the best from the point of view, if you're a bird, if you're, again, even thinking about that, if I'm a Swift, what do I need? That whole thinking. We're trying to look at rights for nature as well. And we met people in Maastricht, and there they brought in a philosopher to the City Council, and to try and influence their meetings and their decision-making process. And they have an empty chair now at this local council, and it represents nature. So before anything is passed, the question is put, if I was, this chair is representing nature, and if nature had a voice, what would it say about this decision? And it actually influenced their lighting. They were going to bring in LED lighting, and there's a big bat population where this was about to happen. And they changed it so that the lighting is very bright during the hours of the heavy traffic. And then it fades down to a kind of an amber later on when the traffic is not as busy. And so it's not harmful for wildlife. Okay, I'll just keep an eye on the time. Oh yeah. So we have another project with trees. I really think of all the technologies out there, and I know some people are really sort of waiting for technology, if you like, to solve some of the problems we're in. But I think the greatest technology of all are the trees. We just need an awful lot more trees. And we did a tree audit in South Parish. We mapped and measured 1,190 trees across the parish. And we collected all the data. It went to UCC. And just 2 things to come out of that I'll mention. 18% of the trees were native. A whopping 82% were non-native. And all trees are fantastic, but the native trees are the ones that support more biodiversity. So we have to fix the balance. And I have no reason to think it's different in any other parish, really,
Actually, Joe is very interested in trees, aren't you, Joe? Yeah.
Excellent. I might have a word with you, Joe, later on. Are you responsible for the trees around the playing pitches?
No.
Yes.
I had some interaction, but I didn't.
I've been long admiring the work that's going on there in the pitches. There's a load of tree planting. It's great to see it. Anyway, so what we did is we have these boxes. They're called Dune Man boxes. They're a metre squared, and they're about a foot tall. There's mesh in the top, mesh underneath, and it means that squirrels, birds can't eat the mice, can't eat the acorns, etc. So we went around to a load of schools on a pilot project, and each box took about 100 acorns. That was the mast year in 2022. It was brilliant. There was no shortage of acorns. and this is the same box. It was 80% successful. Each box yielded roughly between 70 and 80 oak, and they came from two trees: the acorns, Murphy's Farm, and a beautiful old oak in a Shannon graveyard. So we did this with St. Columba's School, and yeah, we did about 5 or 6 schools around the place. And anyway, we now have 600 oak in pots. So we're going to be working with Home Tree in County Clare, and they're going to take more or less half of them, and we're going to plant them in a farm in Dunamore in North Cork, and the other half are going to go to an estate in Glenville in Cork. A lovely couple there have acres. They lived in Kenya all their lives, and they're now back, and they want to plant trees. So I'm delighted, because I was thinking, where am I going to put them, you know? It's a lot of trees. And we're doing the same this year. We're planting, but I cannot get acorns for love nor money. There's just none anywhere. It's just one of those years. So we possibly are going to work with crab apple instead this year in the boxes. Like, the reason we went with oak and hazel is because for children, it's very immediate. They grow and they can see something straight away. Whereas with hawthorn, we're working a lot now with hawthorn and any of the berries take longer, because you have to macerate them and stratify them, and you mightn't see a bit for 2 years. So we're probably going to have to do a mix this year, you know. But we're going to concentrate on crab apple, because it's the one apple you can grow from seed. The other apples you have to graft. So, by the way, I'm looking for crab apples. If anyone has any, I'm seriously looking. I need 2,000 seeds. You can give me the apples if you like. Yeah. I'm kind of serious about that. I'm short, so I'll put the call out. Okay, so look, we've a fantasia of oak. As I say, we've 600 oak, and we grew them in the box in leaf mould, and we're encouraging the schools now as well to collect leaf off the streets, not off the grass. And you could do it here as well, and it breaks down. You saw it last week, Caroline. You actually bagged a lot of it. We literally put leaf last year into a container that was just wire mesh. Got plenty of air, and it's broken down to a beautiful brussy, what would you call it, compost, and it's ideal for planting trees in the beginning, seeds, because the seed will come with everything it needs. It doesn't need too much nutrition, and there's not too much nutrition in the leaf mould, and it kind of emulsifies the forest floor. We took them out of the boxes then, and we put each one into an individual pot, and into that pot we put a little bit of leaf mould, a little bit of house compost, a little bit of seaweed, and they're thriving. And they're about this high now. They're ready to plant out into their forever home. We're debating about whether we or not we'll put rabbit protection around them, because I'd hate now to plant them out and the rabbits come and destroy them. They become like your children, you know, when you mind them like that.
I mean, the leaf mould is really an example of kind of sustainability and the whole cycle of, you know, from the leaves that are falling from the trees, how we use them to, you know, make this beautiful compost that we use to grow the tree again, and then the whole cycle again, the leaf falls, and, you know.
Exactly. It is, and it's like black gold. I mean, you pay good money now to try and get something like that. And so we're providing this thing, we're calling it Twill, to the schools now, so they can do exactly the same. It'd be great if each school was self-sufficient, that we didn't have to go rocking up with all of the materials they need. You know, that's the idea, really.
I was just going to add, and it might be great when everybody are here as well, because obviously you're very interested, and it's great talk. Jeepers. Just before I came over, I had a conversation with somebody just over, because we've just got the Holly Tunnel up down below here at the back of Melbourne, but Francis Turkin has gotten it going with, so we're going to try to develop that. But we'd be delighted to take some trees from you.
Oh, great.
I don't want to be talking for Frank or anything, but we are trying to develop an arboretum over here.
Oh,
So
super.
and we could tell the story and everything, and you're spot on with your leaf mould and the trees, because the leaf mould is great for supporting fungi, and the fungi will form an association with the roots of woody plants like the trees, and they need that relationship. So what you've done is absolutely, you're spot on. So, you know, and I was just said to the person just before I came over, I said I'm broken-hearted because the pavilion are out there right now blowing all the leaves and taking them away, and we didn't get any.
I know. I go mad when I see the leaf blowers. I feel like going over and pulling out the battery. Thanks for that. We'd be delighted because we have 2 or 3 tree nurseries as well. We really think the city needs more nurseries. Well, it needs nurseries full stop. It doesn't have any. So we have a nursery in St. Finbarr's Hospital. We have one up in the army camp, and we've one in Park Owen. So there is a tree officer now. So again, if you're exercised by this, you should maybe write into the tree officer and suggest they have a tree nursery. By the way, of the 1,190 trees that we mapped and measured, etc., UCC went to look at how much carbon was being sequestered by those trees, and it was really only enough to cover the carbon footprint of one person. I mean, it was a shocker. They had to check, double check, triple check, but that's how many trees we need really to cover, our carbon footprint. So each person in the city would need 1,000 trees, and we've what is it? We've 225,000 people living in Cork, so we need an awful lot more trees. We're the lowest in Europe. I needn't tell you, of course, and it really breaks my heart that we're importing trees. We shouldn't be doing that because we see now the ash dieback, which is a living tragedy. I don't think we've quite taken that in. That our ash is going to be gone. It's very sad. And it could happen to hawthorn because of this fire blight that's also come in. And when you see the bonanza of fruit that the hawthorn produces every year, that's all trees. There's no reason why we shouldn't be trying to grow from the lovely old trees that we have. So that's what we're trying to do in the city. That's the end. Thank you very much.